You're like a fine wine, though, aren't you, guys?
Well, this is...
If he was my type, I'd take you out, definitely.
Would you?
The Silver Fox, fantastic.
I've got all sweaty.
You do hear a lot of young people sort of feel that the climate battle is kind of lost. You don't think that?
What I'm seeing makes me very hopeful, and that the right adaptations can mean the overall impact is not super disastrous.
So this is another side to Johnson. He's very scatological. He will have meetings on the toilet. He will urinate in the wash basin in front of his secretaries. He will wave his, what the tabloids in Britain would once have called his manhood,
His
around.
Johnson.
Snakes on a plane, right? Samuel L. Jackson is just going, I'm done with these fucking snakes on his fucking plane, you know.
By the way, semantically, I'm very, very interested in M-fucking.
I basically swear a lot, and when I have to try and censor it, I don't know how to do it.
Woo. Yeah, post-lunch. How's everyone doing? People okay? People up for second half of day one of Radio Days? Yeah, right. Cool. We're going to start this a little bit differently. I'd like to start with some questions, because I'm just about to have a half-hour conversation with this guy, Tony Pasta from Goalhanger, and he's got loads of amazing podcasts that are doing incredibly well in the UK at the moment. Does anyone in the room right now have a question that they know they want an answer to from Tony today? Stick your hand up if you've got a question that you want us to get to, and I will... No? No one? Anyone? Yeah, go on. All right, we've got one here at the front. We'll get a microphone down to you. Just here. Just here. If you want to just introduce yourself and just say what your question is. Go on, you keep talking.
The question is, podcasts are a great medium to get human connection, in the long format in particular, which seems to be eroding away in society. So my question is how do we get these podcasts to hard-to-reach communities?
Yeah.
So the communities that, let's say, may be in prisons, or people that don't have digital access or digital literacy.
Underserved communities.
How do we expose that?
Cool. Okay, yeah, like that. Any other questions for Tony? People want to ask? We've got one just here. This gentleman just there. If you've got another question, we'll maybe do one more. Stick your hand up and we'll get a mic to you. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone, Zach Becali from Bauer Media. My question is around monetization of podcast. I do listen to the rest of it's politics, and it's incredible content, and I think it takes a lot of work to get to that kind of quality of content. The question is how to keep this level of quality and just like this independent niche genre, while also being able to monetize it and make it profitable for media broadcasters in the commercial space.
How to keep the quality high and how to drive revenue. Cool. All right, that's great. We've got one final question to kick us off? No? All right.
One here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I can't see. Go for it.
Des Paul from The Content Works. My question is, if you're recording a podcast in a video format as everything's moving towards visualization, how important is it to have it in a studio as opposed to down the line using something like Riverside? Does it make a big difference?
Brilliant. 3 great questions. Love that. We'll definitely get into visualization. So we'll try and cover all of those. If you've got questions throughout the session, just stick your arm up and we'll try and come to you, because we'll try and make this as kind of dynamic as we can. So thanks for joining us. My name's Sam. I work at the BBC. I run news podcasts at the BBC and look after Newscast and Americast and some Radio 4 programs as well. And I'm really excited to be here talking to Tony, the man behind The Rest is Politics, The Rest is History, The Rest is Entertainment. And as we're about to hear, the rest is yet to come. Loads of interesting stuff to get into. Please give a warm welcome to Tony Pasta.
Hello.
Cool. Hey.
Hi.
You okay?
Yeah, good.
Great. Some good questions. Good questions. We'll get into it. All right. Let's start at the beginning. Give us the origin story. How did Goalhanger begin?
Sure. So, hello everyone. We started as a TV production company, basically specializing in documentary and mostly sports documentary. And then we set up in about 2014, and 5 or 6 years in, we started experimenting with podcasting. The podcasting very quickly grew, very rapidly, and it allowed us something different from the TV world, which was that we had no commissioner. We didn't have to go and beg somebody to give us the money to make a program based on one of our ideas. We were able to experiment with our own ideas. We were able to go direct to the consumer, direct to the audience, and live and die by whether or not they were successful. And this was a massive change of our approach, having depended for years on persuading somebody to give us the budget to go and make a show.
Yeah. How would you describe the ethos of Goalhanger and what you're trying to do?
Well, it started out with us making podcasts that we wanted to listen to. I made a couple of history podcasts. We made a politics pod, branched out into sport. It was basically making stuff we wanted to listen to and that we were able to, that we really believed in. Our ethos has expanded now. We basically I'd like to think we make entertaining podcasts. I mean, they may be politics, they may be history, they may be sport, they may be entertainment, but they're, first and foremost, they're very, hopefully, warm, engaging conversations between two people who have a great relationship, and that the audience enjoys being the third person in that relationship. And we know there's this word parasocial, which we hear a lot now, and we know that audiences like spending time with our hosts.
Is it always two people?
It's not always two. We have our football podcast is 3, but by and large it's 2, yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting. I hadn't heard you say that. 2 people is actually kind of at the heart of what you're trying to do at Goalhanger.
Yes, central to what we do is a relationship between the 2 hosts. We actually experimented with our podcasts in terms of getting guests, and what we found was that the audience didn't want it. For example, our biggest podcast is called The Rest is History. It's Tom Holland and Dominic Sambrook talking about all manner of history from ancient Greece and Carthage all the way through to the modern day. And we developed this relationship between the 2 of them, and the audience really enjoyed it. And whenever we got a guest on, the audience figures fell. And after a while, we realized that they didn't really care what the guys spoke about. They just came for the conversation between 2 super smart people who have a warm, funny, intelligent conversation, and people really enjoyed being with them.
You mentioned the audience. Just in terms of ethos, I'm kind of interested by the first question that we had at the beginning about kind of underserved audiences. Do you kind of have, like in terms of audience segmentation, are you kind of thinking about that kind of stuff, or is it maybe that's come later, or?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you about audience is that we are surprised by our audience. We're surprised obviously by its size, but also by its age, by its youthfulness. I'm a father of 3 kids, and I'm always being told that young people just want short-form content. They want everything to be cut tight and edited for glitzy short form. And in fact, that's not true. I come bearing good tidings, which are that the so-called TikTok generation of people wanting everything under a minute simply isn't the case. The average listen time to our podcast is over 40 minutes, and 2/3 of our audience is in their 20s and 30s. So the young generation of young professionals, relatively fresh out of education, are listening to intelligent, long-form content, and they're listening to it for a long period of time. So, it's great news in my view.
Your average listen time is
41 minutes is our average listen time, yeah.
And that's across the whole network?
Across the network.
It's interesting because from a BBC perspective, I think there's lots of conversations about podcasts and launching and developing and all of that. And more often than not, I think we are stepping in, like we're maybe falling into a 30-minute program. And it's interesting to hear that your average, because presumably that means some of them are much longer.
Yeah, so the KPIs, as it were, are how many people listen, how long they listen for, how many of them listen through the whole pod or at least 3/4 of it. And by and large, our listen-through times are extremely long. We're also, we're pioneering the move into video, i.e. back into video for us. And what we're finding actually is that on YouTube, for example, The watch times are shorter than the audio, so they average about 23 minutes, but they're still super long for YouTube. So, yeah, all in all, we talk about in the office the fact that there's a kind of recession of attention. Everyone's fighting for minutes spent on platform. Spotify are absolutely obsessed with this metric. How long do people spend on platform? And one of the great advantages of podcasting is that we're told by Spotify that on average, if you go to Spotify for music, you listen to 4 songs, about 12 or 13 minutes. If you come and listen to one of our podcasts, you're going to spend over 40 minutes. And so you can see from the maths that a well-listened to podcast is worth 3 times the amount of somebody coming on for music.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned KPIs. Let's just talk about the business model for a moment.
Yeah.
Are you guys making money?
We are making money. I know it's not easy, and there's a lot of podcasters that are not making money or are just about making money. But we have, we're making money, and the business is successful. It's always made money. We have to be one of the things in the UK, and I know some of you will be from North America, where the world is different. The problem in the UK and also in Europe, I believe, is that the market for spending on advertising around podcasting is relatively immature. And so the amount of money available, the big pot, if you like, that we're all trying to be able to be rewarded from is relatively small. The UK, £75 million a year is spent on podcast advertising. That might sound like a big number, but it's not. It's a really small number for an industry the size of ours. So if you compare that with the US, the US is approaching $4 billion a year. We're 75 million. So that's clearly way disproportionate to the population size. But we're seeing it grow. But what's happened in the UK, unlike in the US, I think, is that we've had to be super smart about how we monetize. We can't rely just on adverts. We've had to build out a variety of models, including, so we have sponsorship. That's host-read sponsorship, where the hosts of the show endorse a product. That's the highest value single income stream we have. Then you have ads, programmatic ads, cheap and cheerful, $6 per 1,000 listens. And then we have subscription. We have a significant subscription model. And we also do live events. There are 4 principal ways of earning money. And in the US, where the ad model is so much more mature and bigger, they have not had to build out those other revenue streams. And so when the ad market suffered a little in the US recently, podcast companies suffered disproportionately. They hadn't built out live, and they hadn't built out subscription. So part of being in a smaller market and having to scrap for a living made us also able to sustain ourselves when the ad market went up and down.
So should we talk about one of your podcasts? Should we talk about Rest is History?
Sure.
Your biggest podcast, right?
It's our biggest podcast internationally. The Rest is Politics is our biggest pod in the UK, but The Rest is History has found a significant international audience. So, for example, 31% of The Rest is History audience is in America. It's the only show that regularly makes Apple's top charts that isn't an American show.
Yeah, cool. Let's play a little clip. If we could roll the first video, please.
A man with one of the worst names I think we've ever had on The Rest is History is the American ambassador, who is a man called...
Yeah, how do you pronounce this?
His name is... I mean, how would you introduce yourself to people like this at a party? His name is... I can't even say it because I'm laughing so much.
Well, okay, well, let me see if I can work out how you say it. Is it Spruiel? Sprill?
I think it's...
Spruile?
I think his name is Spruiel Braden.
I mean, we may have listeners called Spruiel.
In which case
we should apologise.
Such people wouldn't listen to The Rest is History.
But that is a mad name.
People in the audience know this podcast? Yeah? Yeah. So why is this such a big hit?
Why is it such a big hit is one of the great questions. I have to say that this is constantly surprising to us. I mean, it's downloaded 18 million times a month. And the most common thing that people say to me who are fans of the show, who I bump into around London, are, I wish history had been taught like this when I was at school. We're not really teaching history, we're telling stories, and these two boys are brilliant at it. And, you know, the reassuring thing is that there's a massive appetite for great history telling. I mean, these two are fantastic historians, but that's not what they're there for. They're brilliant communicators. They've got a fantastic relationship between them. They're enormously warm and engaging. They're very witty. They're very smart. It's got a fantastic tone of voice. They're a pleasure to be in the company of. I mean, people say to me, you know, which is your favorite podcast? And I'm obviously like, all your children are equal. But, you know, this is the one I listen to when I'm on holiday. It's just like unmissable.
Yeah, cool. And you can hear the tone of voice in that clip and the kind of, you know, the obvious feeling that the two of them have between each other. You mentioned earlier subscriptions.
Yeah.
And I hear all of your pods talking about subscriptions. Like, lift the lid a little bit on your subscription business.
Yeah, so subscriptions are a really important part of our business because we basically believe that our podcasts build communities. The community of people who listen and increasingly watch our podcasts fall into a kind of tribe of people, and they want to come together and go to live events together. They want to chat in chat rooms together. They want to discuss the content together. But most of all, what they want is they want to be able to access bonus content, and they want their content early. They don't want to wait. So we do quite a lot of mini-series. It's the classic Netflix subscription model, really. You know, you might get White Lotus coming out and think, you know, do I have to wait every week to see it? And in fact, yes, you do, because that is the model that they've decided to go with on that show. But we will make an 8-part series about the sinking of the Titanic, which will look at it from all different aspects. And the audience can either watch/listen Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, etc., or they can have the whole lot on day one. And so quite a substantial part of our audience just wants to listen to the whole thing as a box set. They're driving up the motorway, they're driving their daughter back to university, they're listening to the first episode, they're thoroughly enjoying it, and they think, this is great, I'm just going to download the whole thing. And so that's been a big, significant driver.
And what do you think does, like, drive a rest is history listener to go from being a normal listener to being a subscriber? Like, how you know, what's kind of pushing them into that?
Yeah, what's the funnel? I mean, the first thing I should say, by the way, is that we're not terribly successful at this. 1.3% of Rest is History listeners are subscribers. You know, basically, I don't know, what does that work out as? 1 in 80 of our listeners have a direct relationship with us commercially. So they pay us to get early access, they pay us to get ad-free, etc. And what we know is that there are certain key things that drive that. One of them is that you know, this early access to the narrative series, but also we provide them with a really good offer, which is they get a bonus episode every week, which often talks about the reaction to the shows, which takes on one aspect of the shows, which might interview somebody about the show. So if you're a really committed listener, you get a lot of bang for your buck. Also, when we do live shows, the big driver on the Rest is Politics, for example, because those shows sell out in minutes. It's almost impossible to get tickets at the theatre for them. Members get 2 days ahead of everybody else. They get 48 hours to buy the best tickets in the house, and that significantly drives subscription.
Have you experimented much with price points? How much are people paying per month, and have you got different kind of rates?
Yeah, we have. We normally have 3 price points. We don't always. We're not quite grown up and sensible enough to have got one consistent approach to this. But for example, we often will allow people to join very cheaply, and all they get is ad-free. For some people, they just don't want the ads, and they're willing to pay 3 or 4 euros a month to have no ads. Some people want all the bonus content. They want it all early. They want it ad-free. They want the bonus material. They pay us usually around about £6. So what's that? Maybe 7 or 8 euros. And then we have some super fans. We've got about 1,000 of these, and they pay us £25 a month, 30 euros or so a month. And they get to come along to special events with the hosts. We have a summer party for them. We have a Christmas gathering. The hosts come along. They do private events for them. And it's a really up-close and personal kind of relationship with the talent.
Cool. Yeah, sounds great. I look forward to my invite. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about a different podcast. Rest is Politics. So this is a pod, again, 2 voices. you've got a former Downing Street comms expert, and then you've got a former MP sitting either side of the political divide. Let's maybe play a clip, and then we'll chat about it in a moment.
Sure.
I think that Kamala Harris is running against a really nasty headwind. I think there are a lot of people who don't want a black woman, I'm afraid, to be elected in the US. I think her record has not been great since she's been a senator, even if it was great when she was a prosecutor. And I think the Democrats are at risk here, that in order to placate bits of the internal party, they're going to go ahead with somebody who's not going to win. I think they would be better being brave, going for a full open primary. And that's where I think, if that's Obama's instincts, I'm with him.
So what was going on there?
So that was within an hour of Joe Biden announcing that he was not going to stand for re-election to be president of the US. We were able to jump onto YouTube. We used Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, who host The Rest is Politics in the UK. And we also got on our two American hosts of The Rest is Politics US, Katty Kay and Anthony Scaramucci. And the reason I wanted to just show you that was because it shows how nimble you can be as a podcaster, as opposed to a more traditional news organization, which would have been busy making packages for 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock news that night. Within an hour of Joe Biden announcing that, which was on a Sunday afternoon in the UK, we were on air doing a 1-hour live show, and over the course of that evening, that was watched by more than 1 million people who were seeking instant analysis, effectively using The Rest is Politics as a news source as well as a podcast. So, The Rest is Politics has become really quite influential. I worked out that there's about 670 constituencies in the UK as part of Parliament, so 650 odd MPs. And I worked out that with its listenership, about 1,500 listeners are in every single one of those constituencies. So you can see that if they get quite close, you can start to become quite influential.
That's interesting. So one of the questions that we had at the beginning was kind of managing quality control, driving audiences, driving revenue, but also kind of ensuring quality. If you're kind of throwing a podcast together an hour after news breaks, what are you guys doing at Goalhanger in order to ensure quality?
Well, that is not our normal method. Normally, we are producing a podcast. We have, significant teams. The Rest is Politics, and a busy week can have up to 12, 14 people working on it, from social media producer to assistant producer, video editor, exec producer, etc. It can be a big old beast. And what we do have is a very strict rule around our content being produced by one tier of the organization and always reviewed by a more senior tier. So we never put anything out. This is a rare example of being live. That's different. You're on YouTube, you're managing, you've got maybe 3 or 4 people who are managing that process. But most of our podcasts are recorded, edited, reviewed, and then put out. But we're putting them out in audio and video form simultaneously. We're also cutting them down for socials immediately. So the whole thing is quite a full-on production process that goes through significant testing for quality, legality, etc.
And I mean, you mentioned that was live, and I think it was Des who asked a question about visualization. So what's the visualization strategy at Goalhanger right now? What are you guys trying to do?
Yeah, so the visualization strategy is very significant. It's our biggest single driver of 2025. We have agreed with Spotify, who are our ad sales partner, that our 6 biggest shows will all have video immediately. So up till now, we've been putting out audio on Apple, Spotify, etc., and then putting out our video on YouTube, not always at exactly the same time. Sometimes we do it a little bit later. However, now that's changed. Spotify are absolutely committed to driving people towards having the choice of video or audio, and so as their biggest partner in the UK, we've agreed that all of our big pods will be available in video immediately. It's made our lives harder. It's made our lives more expensive. It's made us have to work through the night on occasions because, for example, our football pod, which goes out on a Monday morning, first thing, in fact, it goes out in the early hours of Sunday night, Monday morning, has to have a fully edited video product available at exactly the same time. So that's 3 different people in 3 different locations coming in centrally and being recorded, edited, reviewed, and turned around. That goes out 4 o'clock in the morning. So this has been a major lift and a major challenge, and many of our peers don't want to do this. A lot of podcast companies have declined to do this, but we believe that, in the medium term, there's a massive opportunity for having video as well as audio.
We just sat in the Spotify session before lunch. Anything kind of stood out to you during that session?
About
anything. I mean, you've obviously got a great partnership with Spotify.
Yeah.
And you work very closely with them on visualization and other things. So kind of.
So they say that that video podcasts are growing much more rapidly than audio podcasts, and I think that's true. I also think that many of the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, etc., it's in their interest for video to grow quickly. And so, if you have got video, it is likely to be shown more readily. We know that on YouTube, algorithms are discovering our content. So we know our audience on YouTube is different from our audience in audio and audio video on Spotify. It's a different audience. And we were nervous, frankly, when we first started to do video, that we would cannibalize our own audience. That our first show ever to have full video was The Rest is Football. And we were scared that we would put out both of these shows and that the YouTube version would start taking audience away from the other version. And frankly, the traditional audio version is worth more to us than the YouTube video version. So we were worried.
Why is it worth more? What does that mean?
The CPM rates, the value of 1,000 listeners/viewers is greater in audio video form than it is in YouTube form. So we were nervous of reducing the value of the show. In fact, what we discovered, and this is how we discovered that, we put the audio version out only for 3 weeks, and then we started adding video and to see what would happen. And in fact, we lost no listeners at all. It had no effect on our audience. We were getting 400,000 listeners to a football pod. And then suddenly we were getting 250,000 viewers on YouTube, and they were all new people. It was all new audience. It had no effect on the primary audio audience. And so we realized that we were talking to 2 totally different demographics.
Yeah, and we've been talking before today, and it's exactly the same in my experience of the BBC as well at the moment. So you mentioned your football pod, The Rest is Football. I actually had the displeasure, maybe, of listening to it this morning and talking about how bad my team was, Arsenal, last night. Let's just hear a little clip.
His partner, Fabian Ruiz, alongside him.
Just Fabian, they call it. Just Fabian.
No, Fabian Ruiz.
Ruiz. No, they call him Fabian in Spain. They were going, what's this Fabian Ruiz thing?
Okay, well, that's on his shirt, so...
Fucking Fabian, it's easier.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Says the Geordie.
You're obviously struggling to get Ruiz in.
Fabian Ruiz. Is
Clarice, no.
So, did you roll the tongue like that, guys?
Go on.
Fabian Ruiz.
Clarice, no.
Ruiz.
Ruiz.
Look, that's an L.
So your job title is co-founder of Goalhanger, right?
Yeah.
And the other co-founder is Gary.
Gary, yeah. 3 of us actually, and Jack Davenport.
Okay, and Jack as well. So why did it take you so long to get Gary Lineker, globally famous footballer, onto a Rest Is show?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. That's probably our fault more than anything else. But there was also a sense of we weren't just going to cheat code this by taking our very famous co-founder and saying, you make a podcast and then, let's see what happens. We tried lots of different genres first, and it became increasingly apparent that this was working across history, politics, entertainment, etc., money. We even do a drama podcast. And then we thought, the time has come for us to do a football podcast. And what I really wanted to do was, I'd worked in sports TV for a long time. And
that's your background, right?
My background was previously BBC, then ITV as a sports producer. And what I always noticed about this was, you'd get three guys like this in a room. They're about to go on air, and before they'd go on air, they'd be in a green room and they'd be telling outrageous stories, gossiping, slagging off people they thought were rubbish, and then they'd go on air and have a very staid, conservative, sensible conversation, which frankly was never as interesting or as fun as the one they'd had just before they went on air. And so I was quite clear with these three boys when we got together and said, look, I just want the green room conversation, the one with the glass of wine, the cheeky one, the one where you're taking the piss out of each other, the one where you admit that there are some teams you don't like. And we did that. And of course, what you then discover is that the audience much prefers that kind of conversation. So it's become the biggest football podcast in the world. It's the same three fellas that you see on the telly, but on the telly they're kind of doing the traditional, not quite wearing a tie, but you know what I mean, that kind of traditional broadcasting. And here, they're more like super smart fans who've played the game and are having a gossip in the changing room.
And I mean, that clip there that we just watched was from the Euros.
Yeah.
Which is obviously, a big moment for the podcast.
Yeah.
And you seem to have half a football team in the background.
Yeah, we had a very relaxed approach to it. What we did was, all three boys were working at the Euros in Berlin. So we hired
other broadcasters for the BBC.
For the BBC, yeah. And we hired a big, beautiful, lovely apartment that we knew that they would. So they were going back to a hotel room every night on their own, which I knew would be the case. And then we said, why don't we just get a great apartment where they can all come together? We'll keep a brilliant fridge stocked full of good wine and get nice takeaways in. Have a big telly with English football, with English commentary on the football, and it became their absolute go-to place every day. And so they would work in the evening and then come straight round to the apartment, record a podcast, have mates round. We had, I think, three Premier League managers pop in. Wayne Rooney came. It became a kind of place to go. And they had a very different style of broadcasting. And interestingly, it did 19.7 million downloads in 30 days, that pod.
Across 1 month.
Across 1 month, yeah. And,
under 20 million.
And 10 million of them were video views and 9.7 million were audio. It was the first time we'd had a podcast really shift to become a video-first entity.
Fascinating. So we've got under 10 minutes left to go. Does anyone have any more questions that they want to put to Tony? Yeah, we've got a guy just about a third of the way up here at the front. If we could get a microphone to this guy here. And whilst we're doing it, one thing that kind of stretches, I think, across all of your different programs is community and engagement and kind of developing relationships with listeners in a way that maybe traditional broadcasters over the past however many years have slightly struggled with. Just kind of like talk to us a little bit about how important that is. And as part of that, and obviously when people are at radio days, they're always looking for takeaways, things to take home. One of the things that I'm taking home is 2 words: community manager.
Yeah.
You have a community manager.
We've got a few community managers. Yeah, it's increasingly important to us. So we get an awful lot of incoming from our audience. We get something like 1,000 emails a day from the audience saying, why aren't you talking more about whatever it might be? Or could you ask Rory to answer this question about Gaza? There's every day we get an extraordinary amount of incoming content, and we want to be able to talk directly to that audience. We listen to them. A number of our podcasts have a version once a week which is just answering the questions the audience want answered. And we find that the audience is incredibly engaged as a consequence. So we do a lot of live events. We did 35 live events last year, which range from really small, 400 or 500 little venues up to, we did the O2, which is a 13,000-seat venue in London for the rest is politics around the US election. We took the history show on tour across America. It's going to Australia next. So we do know that you don't really do that for commercial reasons. You do it because you want to go out and be with the audience, meet the audience, listen to the audience, and have that really close relationship.
Even though live events actually is a revenue driver as well. You're not actually doing it for those reasons primarily?
No, it's a relatively small revenue driver for us. And frankly, it's quite expensive to do. So, if you do the O2, you make really good money. If you do a 7-city tour of America, you don't, and we sold that out, but we don't make lots of money. But what we do make is lots of new friends. So while you're out there, the boys went on Jeopardy on TV. They were interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. everybody who turned up hopefully enjoyed the show and told 6 other people. So, you know, there was a real holistic benefit to that, but not really a direct commercial one.
Interesting. Okay, let's have this question. If you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi. I'm Marcio from the Portuguese Podcast Festival. Based on your presentation and based on what you just said about community, there's something that I notice in your work, and by the way, I listen to almost all your podcasts.
Thank you.
There is an element of humanity in the way you approach your business, even because you were talking about all the benefits that you have for being a subscriber, and all of them seemed like they were coming from a table, but there's actually an element of people want to spend more time with the people that you bring together, and there's an element of also fear of missing out to be part of that people would pay for. At the same time, when you have your brilliant live urgent shows, that's also because people want to be part of this conversation, so there's something psychological there to also build upon, and now the community and all of that. So my question is, how much is this by design, and now you kind of answered it, or is this just something that you noticed works commercially, and then let's do it like this, or from the beginning, let's work as humans rather than as a company? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. So the first thing I would say is that we are deeply uncommercial. We don't have none of our senior team comes from a commercial background. We're all producers, so we all make content. You know, Jack and myself are producers. Gary's a presenter, ex-footballer. So we've had to really learn the commercial side of it. It's not our natural strength. We don't have a CFO. We don't have a chief financial officer. We don't have a chief revenue officer. We're just trying to hire those kind of people now because we understand we're of a size now where we need to have proper commercial infrastructure, but we don't really have that natively. So, you know, we have a tone of voice, which I think has been the thing that has driven us. If we have been successful, it's that we've found a way for people to speak to each other. So, for example, on Alistair and Rory's politics show, it's really important to us that we can have civilized conversations between people who don't agree. So what we were really having a strong sense of was that, you know, maybe if you listen to, I mean, I've listened to the Today program on the BBC for years and years and years and love it, but there was a time a few years ago when it seemed quite argumentative, where people were fighting a lot, where people were, you know, we saw on social media there was a lot of disrespect and people being angry. And we had this idea from the start, and we were really clear with the guys. We wanted to have this thing where you could disagree agreeably. You could have a conversation where you could say, look, we're not going to agree on this, but we're not going to fall out about it. And I think that runs across all our pods, that you feel like the relationship centrally between the hosts is warm. Even if they don't agree, they can get along. So we wanted to have that kind of civility run through it. And what's been really interesting is that the young audience that we encounter, especially around live shows, is really grateful for that. They are bored and do not like people shouting at each other. And so they really embrace that warmth and respectful conversation.
It's a great question, a great answer. So we've got just over a minute left. We're actually doing another session on this stage all about news podcasting, and we'll talk about The Rest is Politics and a few other podcasts on this stage at 4 o'clock or just after 4 o'clock today. You can see the details in the Swapcard app. And actually, if you go onto Swapcard, you can now rate all the sessions, so you can say how good or otherwise you found today's session, or maybe other sessions you've been at. But I want to just end with one question, Tony, and it's the title of today's session. What next? What next for Goalhanger? What are you guys going to be doing maybe later this year and beyond?
Yeah, sure. So the big thing for us is that we're in a lovely position in the United Kingdom. We have, I think this morning, the top 4 podcasts in the country. Sorry, I sound smug, but it's true. We have the top 4 in the country. It's great. There's not a lot we can do really to improve our position. What we really need to do is to find a way for our podcasts to work internationally. So only The Rest is History of our pods has found a major American audience. It's also the biggest pod in Australia. So we know that pod works outside of the UK. But how do we get our other content to work outside the UK? And there's a variety of reasons for doing that. One is that it would be nice to do. Secondly, you know, I'm going to tell you a terrible, frightening statistic, which is that based on commercial revenue, one American listener is worth 4 British listeners. So you can see that there's real business incentive to make your content work in North America and in Canada, but also in Australia. German listeners are worth more than British listeners. We need to basically find a way for our content to work overseas.
Great. The rest is yet to come. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Tony, for joining us here at Radio Days. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Sam, very much indeed. Brilliant. Really, really fascinating. So, short break. You can move around. The next thing in here is going to be something to think about your boss, your CEO. Things that keep CEOs up at night. 4 CEOs declaring all their inner secrets and what gives them sleepless nights. That'll be in here in about 10 minutes from now.